Maybe this is your first book, or maybe you're like me, where you are just an underwriter, and you have trouble getting into the visuals because you're afraid that you're going to be info dumping on people. Whatever the reason, I'm here today to help you with the basics of world building your fantasy novel, so that your readers are immersed in this world exactly where you want them, so that they can get the full experience from your story. Know the sort of world that you need to build. The kind of story that you're telling will influence how you world build. For instance, if your book is an adventure novel where we are traveling the whole world, then yes, your world building is going to be crucial in your storytelling. But if you're telling a story that's a lot more character-based on their arcs or what the characters are doing in one specific place, then you really don't need to worry about the world outside of your characters as much, aside from what's influencing your characters directly. So where an adventure might focus more on the terrain and the weather, a character arc book could focus more on the politics, the history, etc. So make sure you know what kind of story you're telling, as that will absolutely influence the details of your world building you need to include in your novel. If you're writing an adventure novel where they're hunting for treasure, focus on the points of the world that will influence that part of the story. You may not need to know history unless something that some king did 1,000,000 years ago influenced where the treasure would be buried. In that instance, you do need to know that history. And if you only need to know that part of the history, you probably don't need to know that king's wife or his grandmother or his great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter or all the things that they did. You might know it, but your readers don't need to. Make your world relatable and then go from there. You need to find something your audience can understand, easily visualize, or kind of hold on to. You can't just drop your audience into a world where they understand absolutely nothing. You can't bombard them with new terminology that they don't know, structures that they can't visualize, or systems that need thousands of pages of backstory just to understand. Make it simple and build your world from there. I read a book once that was hundreds upon hundreds of pages of info dumping just to tell us how their magic system worked. And after all of that, I still didn't understand it. They were using scientific, technical terminology to describe how their magic worked. And they were basically alienating anyone who didn't have some sort of degree in science or technology. It just didn't make any sense to me. I have no training in that, so using these technical terms didn't make any sense, and I'm not going to sit there for hundreds of pages researching just so I can maybe kind of grasp what they were talking about. But there was one sentence in their manuscript that undid everything. It could have just been that one sentence and not the hundreds of pages, because I could then visualize and understand what exactly they were talking about, because they made it relatable. They talked about color, flow, and shape. That's really all you need to do if you're trying to describe magic to somebody. I mean, we can all visualize if I sat here and told you, oh, I have a new magic system. When it comes out of people's hands, it's a silver triangle that spins like a top. All of you can visualize what that might look like. Now, sure, I can fill in the details of how big it is, if it's hollow, if it shimmers, all of that. But you can at least start there and then take them on the journey of what these things might look like. Now, you'll want to do this for everything, including your magic system, but beyond your magic system as well. So, class systems, architecture, how the world levitates, I don't know, whatever you come up with, start with something they can actually visualize and then use words that are understandable to take them the rest of the way. Build your world as you go. So many people get caught up in spending years developing the backstory of whatever world that they're building. Sure, you do need some backstory work done, but it doesn't need to take you years to the point that you're not even writing your book. A lot of this you can fill in as you go. I know I did that. Things can change too. Just because you have it written in your lore that whatever happens, if it doesn't fit the story as you're writing it, change it. You can fill in so many details as you go. For instance, the palace that I described. When I first put it on page, I don't describe every single thing about it. I describe what you see, and then when we're inside, I'll describe what you need to see there. And if for the sake of my plot, I need there to be a random hallway over here that I didn't think of before, I'll just add it in. You can change and develop and build your world as you go. Picture your world clearly before you put it down on paper. One of my biggest downfalls when I first started world building was just trying to make it up as I went. And that doesn't mean you can't build things you need to as you go or make changes. I didn't know what I was making at all. At first, I wasn't really thinking about the history or where things came from. And so things that were coming to me just made absolutely no sense with what else was going on around, because I was trying to build something I didn't know I was trying to build, if that makes sense. We'll go back to my palace example. I, for some reason in my head, even with the Greek history, was building like a medieval castle on the page, and it just didn't make sense. And I knew it didn't fit with the themes of my novel, so it was just this big disconnect of things. So once I finally stopped and was like, okay, what does the palace look like? It became so much easier to describe to my readers what I was visualizing because I could visualize it. If you can't visualize it, your readers are not going to be able to visualize it. Some ways you can do this: look up pictures on Google, find things that might look a little bit like it. My palace is Greek inspired, so I was looking up Greek structures and architecture and the Acropolis and kind of building from there. You can totally steal what you're looking at. Just because you're looking at something and describing it doesn't mean that's exactly what other people are going to visualize it. 100 people can look at the exact same thing and all pick up something different. So it's okay if you're looking at something and describing that thing and putting your own little twist on it. Another thing you can do is hire an artist. If you tell your artist exactly what you need, they can draw it up for you and you can get it down to a T. If you're not finding something online that you like, maybe you can draw it, you can hire an artist, just visualize it somehow. Another way you can do this is a mood board. If you're not describing something particular, but you need to set the mood or just the world kind of as a whole, go ahead with a mood board. Fill in all the things, fill in the colors and the architecture and the people and the clothing and all that sort of stuff, and work from that. Your mood board is going to give you just that, a mood or a feeling that you need to be bringing to your novel. So mood boards are great. Another option, see it in your mind's eye. It might sound really easy, but if you're staring at your computer screen and trying to come up with something, you may not be able to see it because all you're actually seeing is your computer screen. So maybe just take a second, close your eyes, and really piece together the things that you need to be seeing. Ask other people. Have your critique partner or beta reader read a certain section of your novel and have them focus solely on the world building aspect. If you're trying to build scenery, have the person write down everything that they can tell you specifically about the scenery and how they interpret it. If they can't see anything, or it's completely off base from what you're trying to do, then maybe rework that section and you'll have some notes on the things that you really need to be doing for that part of the world building. And just know going into it that people are probably going to see things completely different. No one sees everything the same way when they read a book, but if you're trying to build a snowy climate and they think they're on the beach, that's a problem. So definitely ask people specifically what they see, how they feel about it, anything that you really need to know for that part of the world building. You can always keep whatever you have and just add to it. Another great way to add words to your world building is just repeating yourself a bunch. And I'm not talking about info dumping. I'm talking small little sections sprinkled throughout your novel. If you're going to start describing something, see how many different ways you can describe it. Let's go back to the palace example. Say your character is seeing a palace in this world for the first time. Write down everything that they might notice if they stood there for 5 hours. You're going to have this huge info dump. So take all of that information and figure out how to put it in different spots in your novel. So have the first impression. What are they going to notice the first time they look at this palace? They're probably going to notice its size, the general shape of it, the color of it, and possibly the material. They're probably not going to notice all these tiny, intricate little details if they're coming up in the palace and going into it. So have them notice these sorts of things. The next time they look at the palace, they're going to see a little bit deeper. So maybe texture, small little details like statues or carvings, and the layout now that they're inside of the palace. Now the third time, use some of these same things, but mix it up and talk about the points that are important to the story. For instance, maybe at some point your character is on the planning committee for a ball. Well, then they're going to need to know all of these little details, how to decorate, the floor space, the layout, all of that. But then later in the book, something happens, people take over and they need to burn down the castle. Well, that's when you probably need to bring up the materials, the size, the layout. So mix these things up, but in a way that is helpful to the reader. Don't just be telling them these intricate carvings on the side of the wall for 3 pages. That has absolutely nothing to do with the plot. But if they're going to plan this big ball and they need to find all these decorations that goes with the setting, sure, then describing some of those intricate details will actually play a part in the storytelling. So give your reader the important details that they need for later down the road. Again, if they're burning down the palace, it's really important to tell them up front how much wood or paper went into making certain parts, or the flammable curtains, whatever it is. Point out these key details because they're important later in the story. And sure, you can add a few little details that have nothing to do with the plot. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Focus mainly on the things that will affect the plot. Make sure that we're not info dumping. I know as underwriters, info dumping can be very tempting because you just want to get words on the page, but you really don't need to do that. You can get all the information you need scattered throughout the book, and your readers are not going to feel like it's an info dump or that it's pointless. And if you're someone who still needs help because you can't visualize certain things or you don't know the things that you should be including, here's some world building ideas of things that you can add to not only add length to your story, but to build up your world. Flora and fauna, the architecture, clothing, climate, history, politics, culture like religions, traditions, holidays, customs, the arts, music, dance, art in general, technology, science, magic, sports, body modifications like tattoos or hair, ethics, class systems, hobbies, leisure activities, professions, desirable professions, valuable resources, trades, allies, enemies, and so on. There's so many little things that you can do here. Let's go back to the planning of a ball. You can have so much about their culture here. The dance, the music, what people wear differently to a ball than what they wear normally, who's invited to the ball, why are they having the ball? Are they having it just to have a party? Is it a fundraiser? Is it someone's birthday? You can see how just one event can bring in so much. So think about all these things that you might need to bring into your world. So there you have it, my best tips for you for world building a fantasy novel as an underwriter. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more bookish and writing related videos. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.